Good evening and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
I'm your host, David. Tonight we're doing a season six recap and just talk about other things we want to talk about. Before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's correct. And the two things that we are going to focus on tonight is one is, like David said, recap of season six and our kind of thoughts, feelings, and moving forward, but also the Star Trek Section 31 movie that has recently come out and has just kind of been all over the place with reviews. So just wanted to kind of go over my own first thoughts, first impressions of that, in addition to kind of discussing some of these reviews that are out there and some cameos. So, spoilers ahead. I will say that if you haven't seen it, spoilers ahead. All right. So, go and check that out. Everything is available on Paramount Plus as we speak. So, go ahead, head over there, and let us know what you think. Now, before we get into anything, we typically do a catch up of our week. But before we get into that, I just wanted to ask you really quick: do you want to do the season six recap first, or do you want to do the section 31 stuff first and then move into close our show out with season six stuff?
Seeing as how you're the one who's watched it and I haven't because I haven't kept up with New Trek, while we're recapping our week, we'll do section 31 so we can do all that. And then I think we should then do season six and
Okay,
recap it. Yeah.
that's fine. All right. So then, in that case, David, how has your week been?
Week's been good. Work's been fine. Again, just kind of normal. I'm laughing because the last thing that happened last night, less than 5 minutes to close, I get a guy calling, and he wants to like talk about doing a deal on the phone 5 minutes before 8 o'clock at night, and I'm like, bro, what is going on? Like, come into the store. And
Hmm.
I got chewed out pretty hard last time I made a deal on the phone because it turns out the person who called asking if I make a deal on the phone was in a store and had just made a purchase. And when I gave a reason for why I was going to give them a discount, it was because we were out of stock of the product they wanted. But it turns out we were out of stock because they had just bought it. Like the computer was telling me it was just now out of stock. So I was like, okay, it's going to be a week before we get it in. So I'll give you a little discount for the wait. And then anyway, turned to kerfuffle. So this guy calls me last night, 5 minutes to close, wants to do a deal on the phone, and I'm kind of still smarting from getting chewed out about that thing that happened less than a year ago. And so I basically told this guy like, "Come in." What I mean, like, I'll do it. I'll do it if you do it for this price right now. I'll do it right now. I was like, you got to come in, bro. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not playing with that. You call me 5 minutes to close. I'm already pissed
Yeah.
off by that alone. Anyway, but yeah, that was work. Started reading a biography of John Jay. John Jay is one of the founding fathers, and he's kind of one of those guys who kind of gets left out a little bit in terms of like the names of people who know some of the founding fathers. But he was one of the guys who was there in France during the treaty that ended the Revolutionary War. He was in England for another treaty that happened in the late 90s. He was the first Chief Justice of the United States. So he's one of those people who was very prominent in his time, but a lot of other big name people have kind of taken the spotlight. And it's just fun to read about him. And then I rewatched Dune, the two Dune movies, this past week. They're both on Netflix right now, but the first one is coming off of Netflix, even though the second one, yes, and the Federalist Papers, Vincent, yes, John Jay did the Federalist Papers. He did three of them out of the nearly or over 80 different Federalist Papers. But anyway, sorry. Watched the two Dune movies. Dune Part 1 is coming off of Netflix, so I was like, I got to watch them. And then Dune Part 2, obviously, just came out within the last year. So watching them back to back, one night after the other was fun just to have them right there. I mean, it's also great because on this Friday of this week, I'm going to go to a Hans Zimmer. I guess you call it a concert. I mean, concert doesn't sound quite right, but it's a concert. It's Hans Zimmer playing his music And so I assume that the Dune music will be showcased. So I'm looking forward to that. And then I just started watching Blue Eye Samurai today, which is also on Netflix. So far, it's been an interesting show. Um, it's about a young female wannabe samurai who she has blue eyes because her heritage is part Western, part Japanese, and so she's kind of an outcast character. But only 2 episodes in, very graphic, very violent.
Hmm.
But so far, it's been interesting. Um, Not like the best thing ever, but been enjoying it for what it's worth. So yeah, that's basically all I have to say. So what's up
Okay.
with you?
Well, I did a lot. I mean, for work basically was work, no big deal. But then my entire household got sick, so that left me with a lot of free time to do other things.
Right.
And when I mean sick, I mean it was like rapid succession, one after another, vomit from one
Uh,
end of the house to the next. It was quite awful.
ugh.
My daughter kicked it off, and then the weird part about it was I felt fine right up until I was having to deal with her.
Yeah.
And then it was like my stomach kinda got upset, but I didn't really think anything of it because it was very mild, very mild. And she's thrown up before and, I've handled it and it's never caused me to get nauseous or queasy or any of those things before. But
Right.
something was not quite right this time, and unfortunately, I did not make it to the bathroom when
Oh no.
my turn came. However,
Oh.
I was at this weird halfway point between my living room and the hallway, which led to the bathroom. But my front door was right there, so I threw open the door, rushed outside, grabbed my trash can, and began to violently and loudly
Oh
vomit all over the
no.
place. And I mean, it was awful to the point where it was almost like I was scream vomiting. It was so, much.
Yeah.
And it was yeah, just terrible, which now like it all hit me then all at once, all the rest of the symptoms, everything else. So my daughter was laid up, I was laid up. It's just well, it was a mess. And my mother was trying to help out, but
Right.
then she eventually
Caught it.
also
Ugh.
got sick. So she was kind of our last holdout there, and it just that didn't work. So yeah, just gross all
Yeah.
around. So now we all had to be sequestered together and sick and trying not to be, and it was just yeah, don't recommend it. And then I'm thinking back, like how he possibly could have been exposed because we haven't been sick in quite some time. And of course, the school sends out notices whenever something is going around. But even then, we've done a pretty good job of staying out of all of that. But I guess this time it hit us. It hit us. So
Mhm.
I used that downtime to I took 2 sick days. Used that downtime to catch up on some things. Started a new show called The Pit, which is on Max, which is a basically it's in the same vein as ER. In fact, it stars Noah Wiley as one of the chief residents in this show, also based in Chicago, like ER was. I have been cracking up about that fact that he's once again playing an ER doctor in Chicago. And I was like, they should have named his character John Carter and let this just
Just
be the unofficial continuation of
yeah.
ER.
Wink, wink, nod, nod. We don't have
Right,
to necessarily say it's the same
right.
character, but the name's the same. Yeah.
And I was trying to figure out why they didn't do that because I looked the show up and it's written and produced by the same people who wrote ER. So it's just like, guys, like you got the whole band back together and then you didn't stick the landing. Like, what's the deal? You had it and then you lost it. So,
Right.
but it's a very interesting show. So far, the first season is it's about one day in particular. So they've broken it down, and this episode is about um, the 10 a.m. hour, and this one's about the 7 p.m. hour, and so forth and so on. So, um,
Sounds
I'm
actually
really
pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm liking that so far and how they do it. I don't know if they're going to do the whole season this way or what, but so far I've liked this way that they're doing it. So definitely enjoying that. Another thing that I watched, I guess this will be my rewatch, was of course Samurai Jack. I went all the way through because they
Ah,
I guess fairly recent, well, not fairly recently, a couple years ago, they finally came back and finished that storyline with a very well done season 5. So I wanted to go back and watch the whole thing and just,
mm,
start to finish and kind of just get through it. Um,
back to the
it held
past.
up it held up amazingly well, and
Yeah.
the 5th season, while much grittier and more graphic than the other seasons before, they did a really great job of bringing back elements from all the other seasons to
Mhm.
finish out this, 5th one. So, if you're up on the lore of Samurai Jack at all, and then you go and watch this 5th season, you're really gonna like it. They did a really great job on how they eventually finished it out, and I also love the, bittersweet ending they have on that as well. So
Oh, I
go check
hate the
it out.
bittersweet ending. I hate
I
it.
thought it was a nice touch. I thought it was
Ugh.
nice. It's like, don't let it end all sweetness and light.
You're this
So
is
there's
this is
been
totally
some,
you and it's
yes,
totally me.
yes,
You're the bittersweet. I'm the like,
yeah,
no, I want the happy
yeah,
ending. She disappears because
yeah.
he's now changed the
Don't
future.
ruin it for people who haven't seen it.
Shut up. Shut up, Barry. I'll ruin it for everybody so they
Yeah,
can avoid
yeah,
that
you really
terrible
did.
bittersweet ending.
So, speaking of ruining things for people, this would be a great time to point out that I also used my downtime to watch the Section 31 movie. Now, I did have, some reservations about watching this movie, mainly because I had seen and heard a lot of reviews about it, and pretty much all the ones that I heard were not favorable. So, I was not looking forward to watching this product at all. It's one of those things though that like I felt like I had to because I've seen all of Star Trek, no matter what it is, no matter what form it's in, I've seen it, and I couldn't. That completionist in me wouldn't let me not watch this movie, really. So even though I was like dragging my feet on watching it, I didn't watch it the night that it became available or anything like that. I still, was going to get around to it, and so here we go. Now David has not seen it. I don't know if he has any intentions of watching it, but this is going to be my kind of take on the movie. It will contain some spoilers, but I will try to minimize those as much as possible because I think the things that stood out to me are less about plot and more about just like kind of some style elements. So it doesn't really take away from the story per se. First off, I will say I I agree with people when they say it is not a good movie, but I'm going to add a little bit to that and say it's not a good Star Trek movie. If you were to take out all of the Star Trek elements from this and present it as just a new kind of edgy sci-fi movie, this would be a good film. Maybe not great, but it would be a good film. Part of what would have made this great if there was to be a bit more complexity, a bit more dialogue to this, but it gave me the impression that this was less supposed to be a movie and more like an extra long pilot to a new TV show. Which, if you guys will remember, Section 31 was supposed to be its own TV show. A long time ago, with the whole introduction of the character of Philippa Georgiou, played by, of course, Michelle Yeoh. There had been uh, they had been in talks to do a spin-off for her, but then COVID happened and the writer's strike happened and all these incredible delays happened with that. And in the interim, of course, actors go on, they do projects, they you know all that kind of stuff. She went on, of course, to do other things. She then became Academy Award winning Michelle Yeoh, and now all of a sudden they were left holding on to a contract that had ballooned in importance, and they needed to finish that out before she before they lost her forever. Because again, once you get that Academy moniker attached to you, there's a lot more that you can do. So she was already ready to take off. So I think that's what ended up happening here and why the show didn't really get the green light that it should have. Now, she has said since doing this movie, she has said that she still very much loves the character of Philippa Georgiou. She's not ready to totally let the character go at this time. She is open to doing more projects with the character, and the movie does set up the potential of them doing another movie or even a spin-off TV series. Will they? I highly doubt it. Right now, with the state of everything at Paramount, it doesn't seem like they're going to be greenlighting any new Star Trek projects anytime soon. They are seem to be doubling down on the Strange New Worlds show run and also the Starfleet Academy show. There's a rumor going around that they seem to have put a 5 season cap on all Star Trek shows now. So all new shows can only only get to a fifth season. Then after that, they're cut and they're going to move to another project. Whether or not that's true, I don't know, but it bears out for Discovery and Lower Decks so far. So we'll see if that holds up for Strange New Worlds, which has already completed season 3, and from what I understand, has also already completed season 4. So we'll
Wow.
we'll see where they go with that.
That's really
So
interesting because you've talked multiple times about how it's the modern show only has 10 episodes, where in the past we have 26 here
mhm,
with season 6 of Deep Space Nine. If they've already completed filming for 2 seasons, they could just call it one and
they
make
could.
it a third
They
season.
could. They absolutely could, and
Huh.
just kind of. This is kind of their way of cutting budgets, I guess, because then what they can do is now that they've got the 2 seasons finished, they can farm this out to multiple networks. The actors are also free to pursue other projects because they're really not slated to have to come back to these characters for a couple of years while all this stuff plays out with
Right.
streaming and promotions and all of that kind of stuff. So it does free them up to do a lot of other things as well. But see, in my opinion, you run the risk of somebody else, you know, popping off like Michelle Yeoh did, and now you've got Academy Award winner so and so in your cast. And what are
Right.
you going to do with that? And if there is anybody who's going to do that, by the way, I'm going to make a prediction. I guess it would be Anson Mount. The guy's got an incredible acting history. He's been in a lot of really great shows, groundbreaking shows. I could see him getting picked up to do a couple of movies, and before you know it, he could really just kind of be out there as well, operating on a whole different level. And he's the captain on this show, so they would really, really be stuck in a bind with him and trying to figure out a way to work around the fact that he's got this incredibly impressive thing that he's going to be working with. Now, back to the Section 31 movie. Here's, like I said, the reason that I think that it fails as a Star Trek movie is because it doesn't do enough to tie itself really to anything in the Star Trek world that we know. No matter where you want to fall, past, present, future, whatever, it doesn't do enough. Much of this is it's the origin story of Philippa Georgiou, how she became the emperor, what her life was like in the Terran Empire, and kind of what she's been up to since we last saw her, and then them roping her back in through Section 31. There's really not a whole lot of explanation as to what Section 31 has been up to, which for a movie called Section 31, you'd think there'd be more about that organization, not just a new ragtag team that's been put together and called Section 31, but something that delves into the history of the organization, where they get their marching orders from, maybe why they're kind of in this gray area in Starfleet, in the Federation, so forth. Now, these are things that have been touched on in other Trek franchises. I know that with the first introduction of Section 31 in Deep Space Nine, we understand that they are in this kind of they're like the CIA of Star Trek or of Starfleet, I should say. The Starfleet's equivalent of the Obsidian Order or the Tal Shiar. We know from Enterprise that they've been around for a couple hundred years now because Enterprise is all the way back before Kirk and Spock and the old gang, and then of course we see them pop up in Discovery and so forth. So we know they've been around, but there really has not been a whole lot of discussion as to their initial formation, how they decide on missions. Is it one person that's in charge? Is there some kind of committee, tribunal? Like what? How does what is their power structure? So if they had given us a bit more information about Section 31 itself, um, would have I think this would have enhanced the movie a bit. Now, again, this could be that these were things they had been planning to do in an actual show, but since we don't have any way of really verifying that, we have to go by what we've got here, and it's so wholly lacking. Um, the next issue is going to be what I feel like key characters are either poorly explained or gotten rid of far too soon. There's a Delton female in the opener of the movie who dies within like the first 20 minutes. And as much as they tried to make her very interesting, and even the person that she seemed to be partnered up with at first, why they were partnered up, because like if you know
Yeah.
anything about Deltons and then who she's partnered up with, that whole thing, then she dies. It was like, why did you give us an explanation?
Yeah.
There's nothing else to do there. Then you have another guy who is like some kind of weird Borg ripoff. He's wearing an exosuit that is controlled by his thoughts, but he's also basically an idiot. And so then you're trying to figure out what's his role in everything. And really, he kind of just serves as a plot device for another character to take control of later on. They don't do a really good job of explaining why he's in the suit, if the suit is malfunctioning or not, why it's, why it is the way that it is. Like it just cuts out. And then he's
Right.
dead. But like before you even really get to anything, he's dead. Um, they had one of the really interesting characters is this guy called he's a Comaloid, which is basically just think chameleon. They just added oid to the end of it, and so he's basically a shapeshifter. He's a different kind of shapeshifter than the changelings that we're familiar with in Deep Space Nine, but he also seems to be like the resident genius. He can figure out a lot of different things very quickly, and he I think he's probably one of the more compelling side characters that we get in the movie. But what was distracting me the most about that character was one, how underutilized his changing ability was, and two, his uniform that he's wearing in this whole thing is a direct ripoff of Farscape and the Peacekeepers and their uniforms that they wear. If you put those two characters side by side, John Crichton when he's in the red peacekeeper uniform, and this Comaloid character from this movie, exact same. I'm talking color scheme, the shoulders, all of it. The only thing that's missing was like the rank insignia that would have been on the collar. Someone just clipped that off and gave it to this guy. So I was distracted by that, and yeah, I just felt like there wasn't enough to make us interested really in any of the other characters. They've got a young Lieutenant Rachel Garrett, who, if everybody remembers from the Star Trek Next Generation episode, Yesterday's Enterprise, she is the captain of the Enterprise C. She's Captain Rachel Garrett. So this is her younger self is involved in this Section 31 mission. But we don't get much in the way of any kind of character development with her either. So for such a big name to be drawn from lore and dropped into this movie, the fact that we don't really see her do much is kind of off-putting. She definitely should have had more of a forward lead in this movie, but they kind of made her seem like she was a bit of a hothead who hadn't really come to understand herself or her place in not just Starfleet, but like the world. So like she could follow the rules, sure, but she tended to get in trouble because she ran off at the mouth a few times, and that's why she was saddled with this Section 31 mission. They almost make it seem like it's a punishment for her, not a truly secretive, clandestine. We need the best of the best on this thing. Um, Again, once you take away the trappings of Star Trek and you focus on the character of Georgiou and her history and what she's trying to do and who the main villain ultimately gets to be revealed to be, it's a pretty competent movie there. Nice little, surprise reveal of who he is. And they didn't make him truly one dimensional. Like there was a touch of that at times, but then, with Michelle Yeoh being the person that he's got to play off of, they built a very complex character fairly quickly, especially considering we don't see a whole lot of him for the majority of the movie. So when you do get her to really like act and not just be, beating people up and doing ninja moves every which way, when she's actually able to like work lines and have real scenes, she's obviously quite good. I mean, you don't get an Academy Award for being crappy, you know? So, there you go. Like she's great in the movie, undeniably, but I just feel like it was very flat for what they had and for what they were trying to promote. And if they do another movie, there's a lot that they can build off of, but they will definitely need to work on their story and bring the complexity of the story up. If this is to be like kind of a surprise launch of another TV show, then I can see them kind of wanting to wait some things out and draw some things out and give us a bit more to work with that way. But it just doesn't seem like that's the case at this time. So, like I said, it's not a good Star Trek movie, but it is a good movie overall. So, it's a good time movie. Are you going to end up in tears watching it? No. Is this the next movie she wins an Academy Award for? No. But it's still entertaining enough that you can enjoy it. Only people who are ever going to be like, it's awful are going to be people who are looking for some kind of diehard, really gritty Trek movie. You're just not going to get it here. You're not going to get the steeped in the lore, the quick references to things that only you would know if you'd watched Next Generation or Deep Space Nine or whatever. You're not going to get any of those things. So don't look for it. And yeah, and to any fan who's thinking of watching it, definitely don't look for it. You'll enjoy the movie more if you don't look for those things.
Right.
Um, there's a surprise cameo at the end. Um, Jamie Lee Curtis pops up in the movie as well. She is the voice, or not the voice, but she is the personification of Control in the movie. So Section 31's Control. She does her brief little bit there to introduce their next mission. Um, Nice to see, she and Michelle Yeoh had worked in that movie. What was it called? Everything and whatever all at once.
Everywhere
Whatever.
all at once.
Yes,
Everything
that
everywhere all.
that title. They'd worked on that
Hot
together, and
dog
apparently,
fingers, baby. Hot dog fingers. You've seen it, right?
no, I have not seen it.
Okay.
Well, apparently they have worked up quite the friendship. So this was kind of a nod to that friendship, her being in this movie for her, for her friend. So that was really nice to see. So I like that a lot. But other than that, yeah, just I would just say go watch it. Yes, Vincent, I will agree. Star Wars esque fan service. This was very much trying to get into that glitzy, the way that the new Star Wars movies look, and the way the new Star Wars anything in the Star Wars franchise these days looks. It had a lot of that darker, you know, pew pew stuff going on. There were no real phasers here like you're expecting from like TNG or whatever. None of that. So yeah, this is very much more actiony, less thought provoking like you're used to from Trek. So, but I would argue that's gone away in Trek anyway. They don't really do a whole lot of that anymore the way they used to. So there's that. Um,
Okay.
so yeah,
So on a scale of 1 to 10, where does it fall?
I would give this one a solid five. A solid five. You could even, you'd even be forgiven for saying it's a four. I wouldn't go any higher than five for sure. Mainly because there's just not enough of Michelle Yeoh acting in it. There's a lot of action, yes, but not acting. She doesn't have to do a whole lot to carry her story. Even the first part of the movie where we're doing the whole history of her, it's another actress who's playing a younger version of Giorgio in this, So yeah, it's missing her. It's missing her being able to give you a lot of additional story, a lot of complexity. It's missing a lot of those elements. So yeah, and then they don't make up for it in any way by giving you more Trek stuff. Like we don't get a new ship to look at. We get a garbage scow. We don't get fancy new uniforms or shiny technology or any of those things. Everything is very dirty, dingy, unrecognizable things. There's nothing in there that you could point at as a fan and be like, "Oh, that's the, whatever it is, the Toxu Tut or whatever." There's none of that here. So, yeah, it's just yeah, kind of one note on that. So that's why I knock it down so far. If they would work on those things for a part 2, they could have a much better movie. So, we'll see. Now, that's the first half of our show. Do you have any questions before we move on? Any questions, any comments? Anybody before we move on?
I mean, I'll just say that I don't I haven't watched any new Trek, so I don't have any fresh opinion on any of it. So people can think what they want, but I won't have anything to say on the subject for now. Once we get done with Deep Space Nine, I imagine I'll try and I'll do Voyager and then maybe Enterprise. I certainly would love to watch the Picard show just to because I hear
I think you should
I
watch that next. I think that after you watch Deep Space Nine, you should actually watch Picard next because a lot of Picard follows the Deep Space Nine timeline more than it does Voyager, even though Voyager's mixed into all that. But yeah.
well, I would just say that if Seven of Nine is a character that
Oh yeah, that's true.
matters,
Yeah.
so that's why I would watch Voyager next, just to give her character a chance to show up and do something. Um, so yeah, I'm sorry to hear that it wasn't as good as you would have hoped for. It makes sense that it
I
was
mean,
it's
it
it's a pilot episode that they tried turning into a movie, and that has its own problems. So
Yeah, that's exactly how it feels. It's kind of the way I feel about the Generations movie. Generations, also had that feel of it being just a very long next generation episode
yeah,
versus it being its own standalone movie. They didn't really get movie right until First Contact.
yeah, you're totally right. Generations definitely has a TNG style episode feel for the first half, and
Hmm.
then like the Picard stuff at the second half feels like he's on his own episode for a bit. Like he's
Hmm.
yeah, like yeah, Data Geordi running around like normal doing their thing, but is that the emotional chip part? He has an emotion. He's a chip he's
Yeah,
trying to install, or
he finally puts in the emotion chip. He's been holding on to it. He finally puts it in, and then he goes on board the array where they're attacked by Soren, and he experiences fear for the first time, and he can't
that's what it
help
was.
Geordi, who's later kidnapped.
That's what it was. That's what it was. Yeah, he kidnapped Shorty. Anyway, so yeah, I don't have any opinion on it, but the I've been hearing negative things about it. So
Oh,
I
I'd
was,
heard a lot. I'd heard a lot of negative things. Everything from, that Michelle Yeoh was just she was not good. The other characters were awful. No explanation. Alex Kurtzman getting a lot of heat here because this was he's the kind of at the helm of all things Trek right now. So, there's all this Alex Kurtzman doesn't understand Trek, and this is yet another example of that. And, there's a ongoing um, I guess a rallying cry to have all things Trek related turned over to Jonathan Frakes, which I find hilarious. Um, one because I think that it would be a really smart idea. The guy has worked on Star Trek, obviously since he was
in the
Riker,
'80s. Yeah,
but and he really gets it. And it does seem that the projects that he directs and is attached to, they do tend to be fan favorites without knowing that he's the one who did them. It's like you love it, and then you look back on it and you want to know more about it and everything else. And you see directed by, produced by, whatever, Jonathan Frakes, and it's like, oh well, no wonder they had number one at the helm. Of course, it was good. So, yeah, it's stuff like that. And he did not direct the Section 31 movie, so maybe if he had, it would have been they would have known to put more Trek things in there. So who
gotcha.
knows? But yeah,
Before
solid
we
5.
move on,
Yeah.
is this a good time to ask, like, if you were to distill into the purest essence, what is Star Trek? If would you feel confident? Like,
Hmm.
is that a question that we can answer right now?
Uh, I'll give you a hot take.
Okay, go for it.
Without any, you know, haven't had a day to think of this or whatever. But in all the Star Trek that I've watched and experienced and so forth, I believe that the the best thing about Star Trek is when you get it's about people who come together who apart had different parts of a puzzle, and then they get together and first they have to overcome all of the whatever differences they had to ultimately discover that they had the pieces of the puzzle
Hmm.
all along, and then
They
they can work
gel.
together to do it. Now, whether or not you want to unite them via a outside oppressive antagonistic force or something internal that is destabilized and is going to fall apart without the cooperation of everybody, whichever one of those ways you want to do it, I think that that's probably the best thing about Star Trek. And when you get to points where the people have to work together and it's through the sharing of their story, their struggle, and finding that commonality that makes everything work. And then you get to traipse in all the other Trek stuff, flashy ships and uniforms and phasers and weird androids and giant burly Klingons and all those kinds of things that just kind of add an element of imagination and of suspense to it. That's great, but it's the core part of the story that makes all the rest of the stuff even more compelling and makes you want to come back and watch it. When you don't have those things, you really just have this very flat, basic, one-dimensional story that we've heard again and again and again and again, and no one is really interested in anymore. The basics of this movie is that you've got an alien weapon that, of course, is able to destroy everything in the wrong hands. It's going to wipe out the entire quadrant. This seemingly innocuous box has magic, whatever in it, that's going to obliterate everybody. And the only person who can save us is this sociopath over here. But the sociopath is not up to sociopath standards anymore, so they have to kind of backtrack their history to understand who has this thing to, kind of sort of make it work. So yeah, it's that. Um I miss Trek when there were the moral quandaries with the heightened danger background. When you think these people are the enemy, but then because you talked to a certain group of them, or because one person was able to break through and make a connection, or was able to discover something about themselves that they didn't realize, or whatever, they suddenly realized they're not the people they should be fighting. They're not the ones you should be worried about. It's something else over here. And the only way we can all survive this is if we all work together. We've got to put down this hatred, this animosity that's been built up for whatever particular reason. We have to move past that, and now we have to really turn our attention towards the true enemy over here. I like those. I like the ones where someone is broken down to a bit and has to be built back up by the community in which they've chosen to, be a part of. That was the one of the main draws of Starfleet, is that you take these people who are at their absolute lowest and you tell them that this is not the end, and that there is hope, and that we will help you. And it doesn't mean that we're going to like just take over and do everything for you. We're going to help you do the work. You still have to do the work. We're just going to help you with it. And at any point, if you say you don't want our help anymore, fine, we're not going to do that, but we're not going to take over anything for you. So it's not just coming in, swooping in, save the day, and then we're off to do whatever. It's, here's what we understand about your problem. Here's what you need to understand about yourself to make it better. Now, do the work. We're here, we'll guide you, but you've got to do this yourself. You've got to pick up that mantle and move it if you want anything to get better. And they haven't really done Trek like that in a while, in my opinion. So,
Okay.
all right. Turning our attention now to our recap of season 6. Um, we've done this before, and I like to do it every season. And it's our whole Cisco then versus now. And
Okay.
we've seen a lot of changes with Cisco in this season 6.
Hmm.
And what would you say after watching season 6 and thinking about him from all the time before up to now? What would you say is the single like standout moment for him in season 6 where in thinking of in yeah, and thinking about him from all the seasons before, you'd be like, wow, I don't know if I ever would have thought he would have gone here, but I'm glad to see it.
I guess what I'll say in my own way of answering that is that the biggest change about Cisco this season is his embrace of his role as the emissary. Before he was like straight up denying it. Whatever it was outside of him. It was other people calling him that, and him just putting up with being called that. This season, he finally. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like this season he finally accepts it as something that he even
Yes.
believes.
Yes.
Um, Maybe he was got inklings of it before, but it really is season 6 that he like embraces it and takes it on. I guess that's well. No, there was season 5 when he has that big moment where he walks into the signing of Bajor joining the Federation and says don't do it. That was maybe the turning point, but I guess season 6 is when he's like experiencing I am
Yes.
the
I understand what you're
emissary.
saying. I
Yeah,
think that you're right. I think in season 5 we saw where he had finally kind of crossed over and was more comfortable with it. But season 6 is where he openly acknowledges it. Like
and
it's kind of like
embraces.
we watched the internalization of it, and then it turned into now he's very vocal about his role here, and we see Admiral Ross kind of challenge him on it a little bit, and he lets Ross know right away you know he's still the emissary. Like
Right,
you can say whatever you want to, but he's still the emissary.
right.
So yeah, I get what you're saying there. I like that.
Yeah, and the reason that's important to his character is because as Vincent just pointed out in the chat, the Cisco is of Bajor. He's not of Earth anymore to some extent. He has transferred his identity. He said it at one point, I think, to Jake. Maybe it's to someone else, but he feels at home now with Bajor. Um, it's funny that Picard is the one known to be the archaeologist because Cisco gets to some real archaeology in the last couple seasons, this one included. Except I don't think that Picard would have lost his temper with that one. With that
Oh
one,
yeah, when he threw the tablet at the wall.
I think
Yeah.
Picard would have not done that. But yeah. So I mean, the one episode that I that was just fantastic is the one where he goes back in time and is experiencing a different like the characters are all living in like the 1940s New York or something, and definitely a fascinating look at what those characters or what those actors can do in different roles. And
You're talking about Far Beyond the Stars, right?
yeah,
When they're out of the makeup and he's in the 40s and 50s.
yes, yeah. He's the sci-fi writer
Yes.
that they won't
Benny
accept
Russell.
him because he's a black author, just like they won't accept Kira because she's a woman author, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that episode was just great all by itself, just to see these actors out of the makeup in these roles. Like Martok, you've always heard that voice, but suddenly there's that growly, raspy voice coming out of a cartoonist of all people. So that was great, and I've said it a million times. Avery Brooks, when he gets emotional, when he gets into a scene,
Mm-hmm.
when the man is
Mm-hmm.
crying, both yelling in frustration or crying out in pain, he goes for it so hard, and it's always a great. It's always great when you see him do it, and it's always, as I've said a million times, it's always sad to feel like he kind of gets. He just doesn't get used as much as the Picard character did in TNG.
Okay. I see
Yeah,
that. Okay.
yeah. The
Yeah.
uh, the benefit of the storytelling of having this set location, it gives us storytelling that moves forward, but it also makes it kind of awkward at times. If our episode is based like that episode where Keiko comes back and their daughter is sent off in that weird time vortex and comes back and
Time's
she's
Orphan.
yeah, Time's Orphan. Like that episode is unique. I guess part of the problem of it, though, is that it takes us out of the main story of the Cardassian and Dominion War. That there are times when I'm frustrated with that. Like, just because I know it's your favorite show, Battlestar Galactica keeps up a tension because the story is always based on this. They're being chased by the um,
Cylons.
the Cylons. They're being chased the whole time. Like even episodes where they don't have a giant fight, where they don't have a bunch of you know fighter fights going out and
Hmm.
shoot 'em ups, and Starbuck isn't chasing off or something. There's still this tension of the Cylons chasing after them, and unfortunately, this season there are just times when an episode is going like Time's Orphan, where it doesn't feel like that tension of the Dominion War is there in that way. So the I there's great stuff, and they're trying here, and they're doing stuff, and I mean I know you've already said it, like
It's
the
it's
guys.
one of those things where I feel like whenever I think about Times Orphan, I really do feel like it's one of two things. This is either A, an episode that should have been in The Next Generation, or
Right,
B, it's one where it's fulfilling a contractual obligation. Because a lot of things back then with these actors, they did them again, a contract says you're gonna be on hand for 13 episodes or 7 episodes or 12 episodes or whatever that is, right? So then they realize they've signed and basically they've paid this person to be here for this thing, and now it's coming to the end of the season and they haven't hit their contractual obligation. So now it's we've got to get this in because it's money wasted if we don't. And
mm.
I think that's why we get episodes like Times Orphan. Rosalind
Which
Chow is required to, she has to be in so many because she's paid for so many. Hannah
right,
Hate, who played Molly, she was also contractually obligated, even as a kid. She got to be in a certain number of things, and then even the main actors, they need to be in a certain number of episodes. So we can check off these boxes by doing these episodes and get all of our main people done, and that's it. The problem
right,
is it comes at such a weird pace in the rest of the episode or the rest of the season that we're watching that it doesn't make sense. Times
right,
Orphan is that episode for season 6.
right. Yeah. It's just as an example of that just that issue, I guess, is just that Battlestar Galactica by keeping us consistently with that backstory of we've got constant pressure on us, really
Mhm.
is able to drive some of the tension. And it's just too bad
Right?
that it feels like they didn't get that at all times in this episode,
And
um,
I'm gonna
or in
credit,
this season. I mean, sorry, go ahead.
and I'm glad that you brought that up because I'm gonna credit um Deep Space Nine with giving that to Battlestar, because a lot of the
Right,
writers who worked on Deep Space Nine did go on to Battlestar, and
right,
I'm sure that they were, thinking probably along those lines and being
right,
like, we want everything to be serialized and moving forward in this very particular way. We will
right,
still do our own versions of bottle episodes, but we'll make sure there's enough of each that it does something to carry our plot forward a little bit. This
right,
episode might not feature any Cylons whatsoever, but it's important character development for these slew of actors that we see in these scenes. We
right,
need that because we're going to refer to that 4 episodes from now or next season. It's going to come back to this particular thing. They did a great job of plotting out that show right up until the end, which at that point I think everybody was just tired. So, but we'll talk about that later. But
right,
yeah, and I think they got that from Deep Space Nine and other Trek shows. 'Cause a lot of these actors had worked on Next Gen, Deep Space Nine. Some of them went on to Enterprise and so
right,
forth. So I think there was a lot of that, and just being like, here's an opportunity for us to kind of do this our way, write our own playbook here, and get it right. And
right.
that's why that show does stand out for me, especially as a favorite, because
Yeah,
they didn't do that.
right. Well, the reason I bring that up is because this season had 6 episodes where we are not on Deep Space Nine, at least not Cisco and crew. They're having to try and take it back, and those were some interesting episodes. I mean,
Oh yeah,
season
that first arc there, the first six.
yeah. I there were some clunky bits. I feel I feel like the
Yeah.
Kira and Odo stuff. Like they're trying to like are I don't know. Like part of me wishes they could have done more to be more of a sabotage stuff, and like they're hiding out on the station. But then that would have really dragged out maybe over 6 episodes. Like how do you keep that tension going? Um, the uh, trying to get back to the station takes some time, and then when they do it, it's like okay, now we're doing it. It's not like they make an attempt and fail or something, and then have to
Mhm.
try again. It's so they finally get a chance, they do it. Again, not that anything that's bad. It's just the point is that those 6 episodes feel very contained in the way that I'm talking about because they had that back, on the back burner is this the idea that we're not on the station. That was definitive of those 6 episodes. Um, so there's a lot of fun episodes. There's a lot of little fun episodes like um, Dax and Worf get married. We've had them as a couple for at least a season longer. They
Mhm.
started I guess relationship in season 4, but now they promised that they would get married if they got through the battle and came back to the station. So the first episode after we get back, they're getting married. Again, a little clunky at times. Like Sorella is like not up to Dax joining, and then kind of near the end of the episode, we just kind of get a jump cut, and now we're having the wedding. It's like okay, all right, whatever. Um, and the we saw a lot of Quark's mom, I guess, this season, right?
Yeah,
Ishka just showed up.
Moogie gets some screen time.
Yeah,
We see the episode where what is it? They think that Zek is losing his mind, and they're going to use Ishka to convince the guy that females can do business, but then
right.
she gets sick, so she can't do it. And then we also see the episode
Well,
where she gets
she was
kidnapped.
captured. Yeah,
Yeah, so we
and we
saw that
have
that was
a
Magnificent Ferengi,
yes,
and
yeah,
we get
the
the team together, 7 crazy Ferengi to rescue
yeah,
her.
yeah. That I honestly I wish we could have done more with that. That would have been an episode. Like I feel like the episode was trying, and they had a little bit of hard time um, finding the right kind of like they Ferengi aren't known for being combative necessarily. They're not
Hmm.
warriors per se, but they're finaglers and they're dealers. Part of me
Hmm.
wishes we could have uh, maybe tweaked that episode a little bit more, find a way to get them on. They're working some sort of really risky deal as opposed to just being in a very violently risky location. But anyway, interesting idea. But I will say that I think the what was I gonna say? I want to find it. Like there was the change of heart episode where Jadzia is critically injured and Worf has to choose between completing the mission or saving her.
Hmm.
Like that was maybe one of the best episodes in the season because that actually was one of the ones where we have to answer a question like, what are we willing to do to be successful on a mission? Are you willing to complete the mission or take care of your loved one? Um, and not even just a loved one. Like if it had been Dax and it had been someone else, like what would have Worf have done? And I think the argument was that Worf was doing it for Dax. That Dax was the unique character for him in that moment. Um, but yeah, I'm,
And that's
I'm
one
kind
of
of
those.
rambling.
Yeah, well, that's one of those where um, this is, as we've said, in the behind the scenes stuff. This is at that point where Terry Farrell was going into contract negotiations for a character to continue on with the show. There was talk of potentially the character exiting, and that would have been the moment where it probably would have been the best ending if they were truly going to get rid of the character. Dying with Worf on this mission, giving us a pivotal moment for Worf here as he's, choosing duty over his obligation to his wife, and having to sit with those consequences. Once again, Worf choosing duty over personal gain or gratification here,
Mhm.
and learning from that experience. Yes, that definitely um, would have made more sense. But they had their reasons for why they didn't do it then. I think contract negotiations they thought were going to go a certain way, and then last minute they really took a hard left into another direction entirely on that, as we see by the end of season 6.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just one of those more unfortunate things.
Yeah.
And yeah, trying to prove a point, make a point to Terry Farrell, which then ends up really kind of hurting them in the end and
Yeah.
hurting the franchise years to come. I mean, I don't think that the franchise ever really recovered from the loss of Jadzia. Not because necessarily at the time, I don't think the character was that beloved. We've watched these episodes and we've talked about Jadzia and this desire for her to really kind of step out because she has some great moments, but we never really see a whole lot of Jadzia. So I think that the love for her comes from this kind of romanticized, untapped potential that we now know we're never going to see because she dies.
Right.
So, yeah, kind of hard on everybody on that one.
Yeah, we should talk about her for a minute. We
Oh,
talked
we're
about it
going to.
last
That was going
week.
to be my thing. The case for Jadzia Dax.
Well,
Do
let's
you
do it
love her?
now
Do
because
you
it's
hate her? Yes.
yeah. I my feeling is they just failed to really know what to do with her character from the get.
Okay.
That was just their problem. Like she's the chief science officer, which sounds really interesting at first, but they never really Perry. I've never said this before. They never did much of anything with that. I mean, there have been some episodes. We even had one, like it was 2 episodes ago, where they were, or no, 3 episodes, where they were watching over Keiko and the O'Brien's son Yoshi when Worf is like, "Hey, Dax, I know you don't want to watch the kid. I know you want to go do your science project, but like it's off screen. It's a
Hmm.
detail about her character as opposed to something we as the audience really get to be with her on. There are very few episodes where science officer meant much of anything. I mean, obviously Bashir and O'Brien are
That
taking
was
care
going
of
to be my
people in the
point
station.
right there. The problem that they had was they did not make a clear enough distinction between Jadzia and O'Brien.
Yes,
They became very much interchangeable, and even to the point where, seriously, I mean, if it wasn't for just little particular aspects of personal background, you could have taken those characters out and switched them in whatever episode you wanted, and they would have worked just fine.
right.
O'Brien's got enough combat experience that even that Klingon mission that Jadzia goes on with Kang, Kor, and Koloth, O'Brien could have filled that just as well. Tweak
Yeah,
the story a little bit to make it about hunting down the albino because he killed a bunch of people on Setlik 3. And this is kind of like the last thing that O'Brien swore he was going to do before he beamed out of there all those years ago on the Rutledge. Boom, story
yeah,
done. I just did it right here in 3 seconds. I
right.
made you another episode, or yeah, it's just stuff like that where the two of them could be so interchangeable. And often we would see where she would be the one that would be taken out, like when the station went on that weird Cardassian lockdown and Gul Dukat had to beam onto the station to eventually help them out, much to everyone's dismay. She's the first person that gets taken out when she's reaching into the little panel and it electrocutes her hands. And so now, literally takes her hands so she can do nothing. She just is sitting there like
Yeah,
this, like literally like this. The episode you see her with burns on her hands and she's holding them up like this while talking and can do nothing. It's
right.
ridiculous.
Yeah, and while I've been thinking about this, I was thinking about TNG because, of course, TNG is the best thing to compare against, and we
Yeah.
have Data and Geordi. Geordi being our guy in charge of the warp core, which only starts happening in season 2. In season 1, he's like the pilot slash.
Yeah.
What would you say about in season 1? He's the pilot slash
He's
everyman kind of guy.
yeah, he's fourth in command. So
Right,
typically, when they would leave, if Picard's incapacitated and Riker and Data were off the bridge, Geordi would be the one sitting there in the command seat.
right,
We see that in the episode. Crap, now I can't think of the name of the episode, but it's the one where those alien probe things start shooting at the ship and trap Riker down on the planet's surface. Picard's gone, Riker's gone, Data's gone, Tasha's gone, Geordi is in the hot seat.
Okay, all
You
right.
know,
I'll have to go back and watch that. But my point though is that Data is, I mean, he's the one who mainly pilots the ship at that point. So that's kind of what gives him his unique like role. But because he's an android, he has all these, he has all this data. So he really works well with Geordi because they can work out problems together. Um, we don't. O'Brien doesn't need Jadzia for that. He doesn't ever use Jadzia in that way.
yeah,
They could have though. And here's the other thing: Data was an android. So much of Data's character is what does it mean to be an android? We didn't really get a whole lot. We did get some, but not a whole lot of what does it mean to be a Trill with all of these memories, with all of these skills and this history. We did get episodes that addressed it, and maybe just to be clear is that unfortunately it's a having this alien symbiote that has other memories is just something that ultimately they can't like just an android is just more interesting as a character to write about. I mean, the character doesn't have human emotions, so he just interacts differently with other people. And anyway, my point is that Jadzia would presumably be in a position that Data had on TNG, and they never gave her
yeah.
the character oomph that Data had. She never grabbed the screen. They never gave her a role like Data ever had.
Because they made the mistake of, like I said, they made her and O'Brien interchangeable. Whereas on the next generation, Data could have very easily have been the chief engineer. There's
Right.
no doubt in anybody's mind that Data couldn't have been the chief engineer. However, they make sure to create a clear distinction between Data and Geordi, and
Yes.
that Geordi has this, innate, seemingly love for the engine room, basically,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that he really shines when he's down there. And
Right.
whenever Data is there working with him, Data never overrides him.
Right.
Data never steps in and tells Geordi he's wrong or anything like that. He listens to what Geordi has to say. He feeds off of his input. They work in tandem with each other.
Right.
Whereas with Geordi, not Geordi, but with O'Brien and Jadzia, very much of what they did, we saw them as, again, either one of them could have done the same thing, to the point of, at one point, Jadzia is explaining something that O'Brien is doing, and then later on, there's another episode where O'Brien does the same thing for Jadzia. So it's showing they both have an equal understanding of all of the principles, whether it's operations, engineering, science, whatever it is. They don't have O'Brien necessarily speak on a whole lot of science initially, but
Right.
we see him do things when he goes on away missions that shows us he's got a clear understanding here. So that's what's going to always cause a problem, because he looks just as capable as she is. So that's their problem.
Right. Yeah, I like what Vincent said here. Dax was supposed to be a Zen master, which definitely would make sense. We have a symbiote who can transport all these memories and wisdom and all of this stuff. But instead, but they made the mistake of casting a young charismatic model who had trouble memorizing technobabble. I can totally, I feel so bad whenever I feel one of the characters have like O'Brien. O'Brien does technobabble a lot, and my God, there are times when I'm like, I
Uh,
don't know how anyone could have memorized that. So
well,
I totally get it.
if you think it's bad now, buckle up, because when you start Voyager, shoo, man, just everybody, they all do it. They all do it.
uh,
There's a couple of scenes in early on season one Voyager. There's like three characters speaking to each other in this. Might as well just be a completely just alien language, because it's just
mm,
like, and they're the way they're bouncing ideas off each other. It's like, wait, like you're gonna have to explain that first part before you get to the others. So yeah,
right,
Voyager takes that and just like ups it several notches. But
right,
yeah, but I think that was also kind of the point. They wanted Jadzia to come off as really grounded, really centered, because that's what they're assuming a person who's lived multiple lifetimes would be like. Nothing phases her. She's been through everything. She's been
mm,
a man several times and a woman several times. She's done all of these things. So barring something truly spectacular, she's
right.
unflappable.
Right.
Um, but yeah, the problem with that is when you pick a model for that, you pick an actor like that for that, you're gonna have to grant them a bit of a learning curve to get things right. And I think that Terry Farrell did a great job of coming up to it. She admits that she was very nervous and that, she appreciated the way that like people like Avery Brooks and then later on Michael Dorn really helped her out to um, come along in her acting and stuff like that. So that shows a lot of self-awareness that I really appreciate in any person in any profession, that she is very much aware of that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, it's going to, when you're watching a pilot, it's going to stand out to you that there is, a disconnect here.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to. Part of me wants to say like they should have done this, they should have done that, and
oh
I
yeah,
feel like the character of Jadzia Dax, the Dax symbiote, as you just said, like unflappable, like that also means the character could have been a number of things, and they just never really sat down and said, "This is what we're going to do with Jadzia." They
no,
only did it when a Worf came along, and that was she's gonna fall in love with Worf, and that is a different route than we saw in TNG. That I we didn't have any couple get married on TNG like that. I mean, O'Brien and Keiko, but they were minor characters. Um, so yeah, I just
and I'll agree there. I think that they didn't know what they wanted to do with her, but I also think, again, this is gonna. I'm throwing this onto Berman once again, even though I've got no proof of this whatsoever. Um, but based upon other things that we have proven before about Berman, he very much had an obsession with these beautiful characters and not letting them be free agents for very long. They had to get paired up, do some kind of dating. Sex had to be thrown in there somewhere. And with beautiful Terry Farrell, and it was, if this had been any, I really, it's hard to go there. But I think if the main character had not been Avery Brooks, I think that what we would have seen was a relationship forming between the two of them,
if it
between the
wasn't Avery
cap.
Brooks and it was
Well,
a black man, are you saying because he's a black
yeah,
man, or just something else, or
actually, yes,
yeah,
because
okay.
at the time in the 90s, that was still not something that they did a whole lot of, interracial
Sure.
dating being prominent on any
Michael
TV
Dorn's
show.
behind enough makeup that we can pretend.
I mean, it sounds silly, but yes, it's like that's he's not a black man, he's a Klingon. That's
Yeah,
the way that it could be, explained away.
yeah,
And we do see enough of a connection between Cisco and Jadzia that it did seem like almost inevitable that those two would have been together. Yes, she was his mentor in another life, but that just gives him a level of intimacy that he wouldn't be able to achieve with anyone else.
yeah,
Even so far as when he goes into the mirror universe, he sleeps with her, or it's implied that he sleeps with Jadzia there,
right.
saying that there at least must be some kind of, however latent, attraction to
In the mirror universe,
Jadzia.
is she still a Dax or is she just Jadzia?
They don't really say. They just always call her Jadzia in the mirror universe. You never hear him refer to her as Dax. So
Right.
I don't know. That's a
Yeah.
good point. But
Yeah.
either way, it's the simple fact that it's Jadzia that he is, having this relationship with in that universe.
Right.
So and again, the only reason why it was permissible then is because that's supposed to be evil Ben with evil Jadzia,
Yeah.
like, so. And then again, obviously they don't show anything with it, and it's a short-lived thing here. It's mirror universe, we're back in our universe, it'll never wipe it away, it never happened, that kind of thing. So
Right.
yeah, I think that that's one of those things that if this had been filmed maybe now, they probably would have gone that route, or at least there would have been a little bit more development of it, like saying maybe they had gotten together at some point in their past and had now moved beyond it,
Right.
something like that. But yeah, not then, not in the 90s. They were certainly not going to do that at all. So
Gotcha. Well, the one thing that I really wanted to say about Jadzia 2 is that the fact that at the very end, in that last episode, she says, I really still kept thinking of y'all as the wormhole aliens. I mean, she hasn't gone through the same experience as Cisco. I get it, but I feel like if you're on the same 6 season arc with Cisco and Kira, like part of me is surprised that her character hadn't embraced more of that mystical side of things. Maybe
Well,
she's the science officer and that explains why. I'm just saying
yeah.
that um I don't know, maybe I just try I want to provide a solution. I know I just said like maybe I
Well,
shouldn't do that,
I
but
think that I think it's one of those situations too where like we have to remember too that these are people who all come from very different worlds, cultures, backgrounds, all of those things. And it's not just like here on Earth where it's, you're from United States and so's from Dubai or wherever, right? I mean, these are people who grew up and developed in totally different ecosystems with different belief systems and everything else. So, that would be like, let's say you met an alien tomorrow. Some alien landed here from, you know, another galaxy, right? And told you that their great Lord and Savior Clendathu wants you to believe in him. Well, you're not going to immediately do that, you know. And even
sure.
if they start showing up and are giving you example after example of their God's abilities and powers and whatever else, you have a totally different belief system that you have followed your entire life. So you're still not going to let someone else. Now, you may be able to come to a point where you can say, I can respect that that's what you believe, but it's not what I believe.
Right.
But that so I think that's kind of the closest way we can understand where she's at, where she can respect this is what Kira believes, what the Bajoran people believe, even what Ben, her best friend, has come to believe,
Sure.
but that's not her belief.
Right.
She respects it, she understands it, but that's not personal for her.
Well, what I'm getting at, though, to be very specific, is that the fact that they didn't really truly address that until here near the end of her time on the show is an example of a mistake with her character. They could have given us that conflict. Give us like when Cisco runs into the conference room and says, "Stop." Dax wasn't there being like, "What the hell, Cisco? What have we been doing for 5 years?" She doesn't have a break with him in some sort of like, "You're betraying our mission as Federation. You're going too far. You've taken a step beyond your like." I wish if we could have had a great sort of like character arc, a conflict between those characters. We could have done something there, and we
Yeah.
didn't.
I think that they were definitely trying to go with she's the one person that's always going to be in Cisco's camp.
That's true. Yeah.
She's never going to step out of bounds with him. That's not her. She's always going to support him because that has been their friendship now for two lifetimes. So she's really kind of dug in on this whole I've got your back. And
Right.
so, I think that if anything in that scene, what you're talking about where he bursts in and he's all looking crazed and deranged and spouting off and everything that I think she would have been more concerned for him and his health and safety than whatever it was he may have been saving or putting a stop to or whatever that. So
And yeah, and that is definitely a choice to make for the character, but I feel like that the reason that that is unfortunate, and maybe this is actually a critique about female characters in general, is that it takes away a like instead of her being her own as the science officer, like I'm here on a scientific mission and I don't deal in the mystical, etc. Um, I have to come with a scientific explanation for something. Then like if she is a female, if we ascribe it to she's a female character that does a female thing of like backing up her friend,
mhm.
maybe that's not fair to say it's because she's a female character, but it was literally because she was his friend. But my point is that I feel like just in general sense that yes, while she was a sounding board for Cisco,
Mhm.
like I mean Picard didn't have a sounding board like that Maybe it was a problem
No,
for
they
Picard.
they tried to make Troy that more towards the end of the show
Yeah, it
run.
got
Seasons,
awkward.
more, yeah, you know, and even they tried to bring Beverly in a little bit for that
Right.
as well, but it was still very much a Picard is going to internalize and make these decisions on his own.
Yeah, he
But
has to
then,
go to Rika and get
yeah,
and
but
meet someone.
but then that's less. I feel like that was a great way of demonstrating a difference in style when it comes to command. Cisco was one who would go to Jadzia to, vent and sound out things. He didn't have a problem when Kira would get upset and burst into his office and start ranting, and then he would kind of talk her down off the ledge, and help her to see a way to do what it is that she wanted to do. But yeah, Picard, he was more he liked to be very introspective. He chose a couple of people on occasion to speak to about the ones that he felt like were particularly hard decisions to make. But for the most part, he made the decision himself. And even
Right.
when he spoke to whomever it is he spoke to, they never gave him anything that would be like even remotely could be considered um, a directive. They
Right.
were just kind of like, here's the kind of guy you are, and here's the situation. So
Right.
ultimately, you've got to figure this out. But I can remind you of your better nature and hope that you use that to make the best decision possible.
Right.
Guinan, as pointed out here in our chat, it was a great one for that for
Right.
Jean Luc. And Cisco doesn't have that. He doesn't have a Guinan, but he's got
He had
Jadzia,
Dax.
and
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
had, yeah, and he had Kira sometimes. He had Odo sometimes, but yeah, it was typically Dax. If he was really feeling it, Dax was the one who got all of that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like when he
She
was
definitely
dealing with
was
Eddington and all that, Dax was the one that he went to.
true.
So in our case for Jadzia, final thoughts: lover or hater?
I yeah, I guess Lover. I will say one last time that I didn't love the way that she and Worf would sometimes interact. Worf's the stick in the mud, and she's the want to go have fun, and her part of having fun is to tweak his his sensibilities a bit.
Hmm.
It was a relationship. Maybe it's just not my relationship. That's not a relationship I would be in if I was Worf. But whatever. I think they kind of grew on us a bit. I mean, that's kind of the point. Their relationship grows, and so our love of that grows. Would have been interesting to see how it would have continued if the character had been allowed to live, and even if the character had been allowed to step back and just take a recurring role as opposed to a full
To
time
this
main role.
to this day, it's still one of the more, or if not the most contentious decisions in all of Trek was getting rid of her. There are
Yeah.
some other characters that from other shows have also gone out before the final season or whatever, but none of them seem to get people as fired up the way that the death of Jadzia does.
Right.
And I think that part of that is not just because it was so shocking, but also because we found out what was behind it. We found out the motivation behind it, and it's not a good one. It's not that, the actress was really just ready to, move on and was looking for an out, and this is something that was agreed upon by all parties. It was very much kind of a threat that then turned into, I'm not going to let you call my bluff. We're definitely going to make this happen. So, um, the powers that be tend to be very quiet about that. Terry Farrell is not. She has talked about it multiple times in the Star Trek documentary, What We Left Behind, which is all about Deep Space Nine. She does talk about that a lot, and what her takeaway from all that was. So, and some of the other actors also talk about when it was revealed to them, their surprise with it, and what was done and so forth. And some people just absolutely not believing it until they showed up for filming for the next season, and she really wasn't there.
Yeah.
So it's clear that it was something that did not sit well with a lot of people, both
Yeah.
in front of the
And
camera and
and
beyond.
they didn't kill her character off in any sort of really powerful way. Like I said last time, if they had given her the role that it was supposed to be Cisco, who was the host of of one of the prophets to fight the paw wraith in that last thing with where Ducat showed up. Like it was supposed to be
Hmm.
Cisco there to be their champion, but you know they tried with Jadzia, but she wasn't a good fit, and that's what failed. Like that could have been a moment. We could have had a moment with that. Like that's why Cisco
Hmm.
failed because he should have stayed. They told him to stay, and Jadzia, ah,
She couldn't embody the prophet because she's already inhabited by the
yeah, she's
symbiote, so
got a
it can't
symbiote.
it,
Yeah,
it can't do two things. It's got to be yeah. That would have been a great story explanation instead of just, oh, surprise, zap.
yeah.
Yeah, that
Well,
yeah.
I mean, and even this, like, let's say that she dies, but somehow the symbiote affects the prophet in some major way. I don't know, and like we get some sort of cross alien like powers. We're timeless in two senses because we got the memories from people in the past, but we also
Ooh,
have
yeah, because
like
it's
the
now, because now it's getting its information about corporeal entities from 8, 9 different lifetimes.
yes,
Yeah, that would
that
have
would
been
have been really cool.
yeah. What would the prophets do with the knowledge of all of those centuries? So,
Right.
huh.
Uh, yeah. Anyway,
Anyway,
yeah. I mean, storytelling, man. Like I always that's my thing is like let's work out kinks in storytelling and see if we find solutions. But yeah,
and that's why I love Star Trek so much because there are so many ways you can do that. I mean, sometimes I just sit and I mean, you've had these conversations with me where we've just kind of gone back through and tried to figure out and fix certain plot holes. And at this point, I'm kind of at the point of Star Trek really shouldn't have plot holes because it's been around long enough, and there have been enough writers that have come up watching these things and being aware of these things that they should not still happen. And yet they're everywhere. So I guess that's just the fault of
yeah. Well, I guess when you're
speed. The
prolific,
speed, yeah, you got to
yeah,
get things out. Sometimes you can't get it all
and the fact that you
perfect.
have multiple writers means that one guy says one thing and the next guy says another, and suddenly there's a gap. So
Yeah,
it makes sense. Don't get me wrong. I just yeah, I feel like Dax was a character that never got her full due. Um, like the fact that Bashir, it turns out, is still pining for her desperately alongside Quark in that last episode was funny. It was kind of fun. Um, uh, I mean, but in some ways it felt like, well, I mean, bro, like you kind of got over her 3 seasons ago, didn't you? And I mean, I
right.
guess
You were
not.
supposed to have right, and that's mild spoiler, I guess. It's kind of why I've got a problem with Bashir later on.
Mm,
It's just, and again, I'm gonna chalk that back to Berman, who is kind of in this. You know, I feel like he picked certain characters that he wanted to live through, and so it was they must be partnered up with the hot chick. We have to make it happen. They have to get with the hot chick because that's who I would want to be with. We see this in Deep Space Nine. We see this in Voyager. It's it must happen. So yeah, they don't care if it makes any sense or not to the overall plot development of the show, the characters, whatever. It's Berman said do it, so do it. Enterprise also was another one that was fraught with um these kind of complications. Some people even call it the horny trek because of all of the jumping around and who's interested in who and the innuendo and all the rest of it that goes on with that show. So, yeah,
which one?
Star Trek Enterprise.
Oh, with Enterprise. Interesting. Okay.
Hmm. You'll see if you get there. If you go to watch it, you'll see they
Gotcha.
get there really, yeah,
Yeah.
soon, quickly.
Yeah. And I want to be clear. Like I don't hate the character. I didn't
No,
want her to die off. I'm sad she's dying off. I wish we could have done more with her, and that even from season one, as I said multiple times throughout those first couple seasons, it always felt like she would just show up for one line, and then they were done with her. She had so little to do early on. It was basically until Worf came along, she was kind of this forgotten character,
yeah,
and I can
Worf
understand that.
breathed new life into her character for sure.
And that is a mistake that you can have for season one. I mean, season one of TNG has Tasha Yar, and that wasn't working out. They had to get rid of her, and they moved on and made changes and blah 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 blah. But
You
um,
know, it's interesting that you bring up Tasha Yar because in a lot of ways, her story is kind of the prequel to Terry's story.
yeah,
You
there's
know,
definitely a lot of
and
similarities. Both of
yeah,
them were kind of not liking how things were going. Instead of getting like a switcheroo in some fashion, they were just written off
yeah,
in an inglorious fashion. She also
yeah,
died in an
yeah,
inglorious way.
a pointless death. Yeah,
Yeah, you're dead now.
you you
um,
wanna you wanna leave us? Fine, bye.
yeah, yeah.
Now you can never come back.
Except as a strange alternate universe child version of yourself.
Yeah, Romulan child version. Yeah,
That character too could have that Romulan version of her could have been something. They could have done some more with that, I imagine. Oh, who knows? But anyway,
yeah.
um, so yeah, I guess we'll have to figure out what that here. That's a great point. The gap that will be created by her absence will tell us everything we need to know about her character. Will she be missed? Will she be leave a gap? Will there be moments where we're like that would have been a Jadzia moment? Is someone else going to step into her place? I don't think so, right? Because the cast doesn't change outside of her leaving. So, but maybe some other smaller character will step in some way. So that'll tell us a lot
Nog,
about
Nog gets a promotion, and
science
there it
officer,
is.
Deep Space
Science Officer
Nine.
Nog. There you go.
So yeah, yeah,
Well, I will say, I do feel like the character of Dax is one that just remained underutilized, and I think it fell under this weird stigma for Trek in general. And what I'm talking about is when Discovery came out. There is a point where they have to go to the Trill homeworld to make connections with a long-standing friend of the Federation who is Trill, and all of the lead up, all of the mystery as to who this infamous Trill friend is. And you're just so sure that it's Dax because they're talking about the Trill's history and how they had served in the Federation with distinction and blah, blah, blah. You're just so sure it's Dax. And then it's someone named Doral or whatever the hell the symbiont's name was.
mm,
It just, and I'm like, it should have been Dax. There's no reason that that shouldn't have been Dax. It's set some 200, 300 years into the future, 1,000 years into the future. Make it Dax. Stop
yeah,
doing this to us. Make it Dax. And
right.
I won't forgive them for that either. And I feel like it's a slight to the Dax character that was unnecessary. And it was just a way. And I mean, there's nothing that said they couldn't make it Dax. It's not like that character was particularly owned by anyone other than Star Trek and Paramount. You had all the rights you needed to say, yes, this is so and so Dax now. The symbiont has survived another 500 years. Nothing that says you couldn't do that. And they just chose not to. And yeah, I don't forgive them for that either. So there's something about the Dax character that they were just like, we're not going to touch it. Like, it's done. We're not going to touch it. So that bothers me too. That would be something I would also fix in subsequent shows if they ever did one. Well, we are coming up on an hour and 30 minutes, which typically is about what we do for these kind of recapping
Recap.
specials.
Yeah.
So, in our last little bit of time here, is there anything about season 6 that stands out to you besides Jadzia's death as kind of a low point in the season beyond what we've talked about before? Is there something that we hadn't gotten to that just is there for you?
Um. Well, I mean, I guess I wouldn't say low point as much as there's some episodes we haven't really. We should just, I guess, briefly mention, like in the pale moonlight. Cisco has been hiding a
Yes,
great dark secret. He helped assassinate a bro to get the Romulans in on the war.
I didn't
Um,
bring it up. I didn't bring it up because I can live with it. So
yeah, I can understand. Yeah, but then there was also the wrongs darker than death or night, where
oh
Ducat
yeah. Oh,
is like,
I
I
I
was
don't
your
want this
mommy's
episode.
lover.
Yeah, I don't want this episode to go on forever, but I did write that down as an episode talking about because Ducat is incredibly creepy here. And how old is he?
Oh,
He
I guess we really haven't said it yet. This was the season. Like we had past seasons where they were like, oh, maybe Ducat might be redeemable. Nope, he is
Mm-mm,
donezo. He is
mm-mm.
so done.
And you mean to tell me, and now we know that he had this very intimate relationship with her mother. You mean to tell me in all the time they were together, she never mentioned that she had children and that one of her children's names was Kira?
Yeah.
And or was Nerys, because she would have told him her
Yes.
name. She was Kira Maru. So
Yes.
she would have told him that she had a daughter named Nerys.
Yes.
So when he heard Kira Nerys, are you meaning to tell me it never clicked for this guy that Kira Nerys and Kira Maru were from the same family?
Well, and answer this for me, Perry. How old is Kira supposed to be? Nerys supposed to be in the show? Like, I don't know how old Nana
You
Visitor was,
know,
but how old is the character
I
supposed to
don't
be?
I don't really know that. I think she's supposed to be in her like early 30s, you
Okay, because
know.
my point I was gonna say is like when we saw her as a child when her mom was taken, she was not yet even 10, right? That means like
Mhm.
Gold Ducat. I mean, Gold Ducat has always come off as someone in his 40s by the actor. I forget his name at the
Mark
moment.
Alamo.
Marco Lamo, 40s, maybe pushing 50s, not quite there yet, but like late 40s. And just the idea that like 20 plus years earlier, he was I knew your mom.
Oh, he knew your
Oh,
mom.
and that she was like kind of like willing to put up with it at some level. Like, well, turns out this is what, gets my family food back home. Like she didn't like I can understand a character who
They
like
did not show any real hesitation on her part. She did
yes,
give in quick.
yes, she
She
didn't have
absolutely
like
did.
a veneer of giving in and then like behind the veneer, the mask, she's like torn up inside and like I
Yeah.
am doing stuff that tears me up in my soul on behalf of my family and I don't know if this is truly the proper choice. Like would my husband, if he knew what I was doing, would he want, you know, if my wife was like if I was being fed, I was getting supplies because my wife was over there pretending that her rape wasn't so bad.
Right. Like let's yeah, call it what it is.
Yeah.
You're getting your food and medicine and everything else for your children, but it's totally conditional on the fact that you are performing sex acts for your oppressors.
Yes.
And you're in a way oddly lucky because you've got the commander of your oppressors.
Like the
You
guy.
got you got his attention, so
Yeah.
you're not being passed around to multiple individuals to do
Right.
this thing. You just got to satisfy him.
Right.
Yeah, but still, that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing.
That was a rough episode, and they weren't trying to necessarily hide from the roughness, but I do feel like they put a nicer like
Yes.
because she puts up with it. It's not as dark as we could have gone with it. I mean,
Once
Kira tries
again,
to blow up the station still, right? In that
yeah.
episode, and
Well, yeah. She tries to kill them,
yeah,
and then she rethinks it in the last minute and saves their lives.
right. That's what it was.
Had this
Yes.
episode been filmed today, that would have definitely been there would have been none of this, "Let me win you over, win your
Oh.
affections, Maru." None of that. It would have definitely been a pushed her up against the wall, slapped her around a couple times, given her a black eye, then spun her around, and we would have got all the implied stuff of simulated rape here
You
happening
think
on our
Star
screen.
Trek would have done that? Would have gone that
No,
route?
I'm saying that's what it would have been if this was like any other show,
Sure.
another sci-fi dystopia type show, they would have done it. Star Trek, I for f- that's probably one of its great saving graces as it moves through um into these new generations, Strange New Worlds being filmed now and all that kind of stuff. They are more graphic when it comes to like their violence, like physical violence, but when it comes to things like that, they don't touch it. They don't show it in any way, showcase it, whatever. They
Well,
might say that it happened to a character, but we don't
right.
see it. We
Well,
don't see it.
that's why I think the why they did choose to do the things the way they did. They didn't go into the darker elements of this, frankly, rape, because it's Star Trek, and we're not trying to get into the darkest, blackest, most mature storylines that you can go with. You are going with a mature storylines, but in a way that can be shown on TV, at like 9 o'clock at
Mhm.
night. I think we can all agree there. So yeah, it's just like that's an episode it's good in the sense that like they're willing to tackle like rough topics in
Mhm.
order to do something with it. Um, Again, I guess there's still a question of like, is that how I would have told the story? But um, Dr. Bashir being, Mr. Super Genius now, it's kind of a weird change to his character where he's like
You know
before he was just this kind of naive, goody two shoes with a
mhm.
problem of chasing women whenever he wanted. Now he's more talented and skilled than we ever knew, and he's been holding back on us actually the whole time. Like,
And he comes off as a little bit of kind of a stoic narcissist, you know? Have you
yeah,
noticed that? He's suddenly become this
yes,
very kind of almost like he's got this aristocratic air about him and he's
yes,
superior. And every so often they've got a reminder of that. And we even seen the episode before Jadzia's death where they talk about that and just, how he's
yes,
become this kind of, is airy, holier than now type, and they're wanting to bring him down a peg because
right,
he's gone from being this kind of naive young doctor to he's always lecturing them and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, I could definitely see the change, which he's another character that we don't talk a lot about being underutilized. He definitely picks up that role. We saw him used early on in the show, but then they did kind of taper off with him a bit, and it was just like, especially after the whole genetic engineering thing, they didn't really seem to know what to do with him.
mhm,
And the Section 31 thing was probably the saving grace for that character, giving him a
yeah,
new avenue to explore. Because without that, he was quickly becoming one dimensional.
right. We had the episode Valiant, which was really, I think, a good one, showing out these cadets trying to act outside the level of where they truly belonged. Our superior officers have died, and we're going to carry on the mission, as opposed to, honestly, we need to go back to base and report in and do
Turn
what
the
we're.
ship over
Yeah, and
and go
like
back to being
and
cadets.
yeah, and like honestly, like we need to go talk to our superior officers, our commanding officers. Just because the one on the ship died doesn't mean there isn't a chain of command somewhere else that they wish to obey. An interesting episode, but then Odo and Kira are now a thing. I,
Mhm.
guys,
Long
like
time,
what's going on with that?
again, it's they can't let the hot woman be alone,
Yeah,
and she went through her series of dating and the will they won't they, and Vedic Baral dies and Shakar, whatever the issue is
falls
with
off the
Shakar,
planet.
um, she won't date Captain Baudet because he's got a transparent skull apparently, and there's just all these things. So she had to be with someone, and this was necessary character development for her, but also very importantly for Odo.
Right,
So yeah, it's just again they couldn't leave her alone. They couldn't. It would have been interesting to see that development happen, and it still have its importance, but highlighting men and women as friends, not men and women who must get together.
right.
You know,
Mhm.
that is something that is not seen a whole lot of either. And I know that we were just talking about Cisco and Jadzia and their friendship, but it's kind of a cheat because he knew her before as Curzon. So you could kind of see why there would be a bit of a mental block for him on, pursuing Jadzia because he was used to, we don't know how long he and Curzon had their friendship. We know that it was for a good number of years. Ben was a lieutenant when they first met, and Cisco, or not Cisco, but Curzon died um,
Shortly before
when
this show
Cisco was a
began.
yeah, shortly before the show began, and Cisco was a commander. So there's a good number of years
Yeah,
that he could have been his mentor and friend and everything else. So there's that. But to show two people who you know they meet here, they live and work here, they have to get along, they have to do this stuff and establish a friendship, and they're just friends. It never goes beyond them being just friends. Would have been a different thing for the show to highlight as well.
Right.
That I mean, I'm trying to think right now of shows that like contemporary shows, if there are any shows that do that, that show men and women working together and being just friends, and there is no will they, won't they to it. There's
Right.
nothing. It's just they're just friends and they just stay friends.
Yeah. I'll just say this. I do feel like I do think it is a little bit of fantasy, frankly, to have this overly platonic workforce of men and women. I mean, the fact that like Counselor Troy and Riker can't figure out what they're doing, and Doctor Crusher and Picard can't figure out what they're doing. And now here on Deep Space Nine, at least they are trying to do something with it. Odo and Kira are actually the couple, and Worf and Jadzia actually were a married couple. Like they actually did go that route. Whereas it was early on that Jadzia was telling Bashir, like, turns out that dating is really hard in the Federation. It's really difficult. Keiko and O'Brien are married. Um, I do feel like that. I don't know. I mean, I'm not been in the military, but a lot of
I, I would
no,
imagine it would be very hard because I mean it's the ultimate in long distance relationships.
exactly.
Let's say that with my let's take Miles and Keiko. We don't necessarily know when they met, but let's just say they met on the Enterprise. The
Hmm.
Enterprise launches, they go on a 5 year mission. Somewhere around year two, this couple starts to, they start dating, whatever else. They get married at the end of year three, beginning of year four, they're married, right? They end their first 5 year mission. They go back home. Everybody takes shore leave. Now it's time to gear back up for another 5 year mission. Only this time, Keiko is assigned to stay planet side, whereas O'Brien is off for the next 5 years with the Enterprise.
Hmm.
Do you stay married?
Right.
I mean, you could
Yeah.
say yes, but she has no way of knowing if he's going to come back in 5 years, or
Right.
if he's going to die, or if he's going to be lost in a transporter accident, or if he's going to, any number of things,
Right.
could happen to him before they could hit some weird time warp and comes back in 5 years, but he's 50 years old to her, 31.
Right.
What do you do?
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And that just puts I think a kind of a pin on it because I'm not in the military now, but I would think that military ships or just ships in general, like those are gone for months at a time, and how do those people handle being away like that? I know it's pretty brutal. I know someone who has been on some of that, and it is
Mhm.
brutal to be separated for people for long periods of time. So, um, yeah, I love that idea you had. I think you've mentioned it on here before of like, what if you did like a 10-year mission and it's like a fleet of ships going out and doing
Mhm.
something, and like just like it's about Battlestar Galactica, it would make sense that there's like some sort of central ship where like the idea is it's the relaxation ship. Like everyone goes
It's the
here.
city, right, it's the
Yeah.
city, and then all
I
of
like
these are your kind of like townships or whatever
and I
that do
like the
other
idea that we
specialized things.
I like the idea there would be like this gigantic hollow suite where like the whole idea of this gigantic hollow suite is that it looks like doesn't look like a ship. It looks like just wherever. And they regularly have events. Like there's an event planner type person and crew, and like their job is to like mix it up. For this month, we're out on the middle of the plains of the
Mhm,
Serengeti
mhm.
and then next month we're gonna have a mountain type retreat with skiing or something, and like so like we can have our characters regularly go off and like relax in the sense that wouldn't make sense in the modern world, but definitely would in future Trek with the something like that. Um, yeah, that would work.
I
You
would
could have relationships on something like that.
Yeah. I would like that, but then it would be like just an added twist to make it a little dark. Like they go out for this 10, 15 year mission, right? So, of course, they're gone for so long, they develop their own cultures and language and
Yeah,
art and everything else, right? Because there's nothing else for them to do and there's no
right,
one else for them to be in contact with. So then
right,
they do all that and then turn around and come home and everything's different. And it's like they suffer PTSD because they have to be integrated into new ships and new crews and new whatever. But
Oh
they just
wow.
spent the last
Yeah.
20 years of their life on this ship with these other people. That was their whole existence. And
Right.
technology has changed. And when they left, everything they had was state of the art. Now they're back. And it's like not only 20 years different, but it's also developed in a completely different way because people have developed their own stuff based upon their needs and their missions and everything else.
Right.
Be such a mind trip to do. Oh man, that would be great. I'd love
Yeah.
to watch that.
Yeah. Fascinating. Well, man, it is
Oh
definitely
yeah, I was gonna
hour
say,
45.
yeah,
Woo!
if you have stayed with us for all of this and these crazy rantings and ramblings, then
Thank
great,
you.
great.
Yeah.
Thanks for staying with us. But all that to say, we are really excited to be moving into the final season of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, season 7. We are going to take a brief break. We will be back in, what did we say? 2
2 weeks.
weeks?
Yeah.
Yes, we'll be back in 2 weeks, and
Take a week off.
we'll be starting with all of the stuff for season 7. We do have more of the Expanse coming up for you as well, and hopefully by the time we get back, there'll be some more updates when it comes to new Trek stuff. So we will let you know. So, guys, until next time, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.